Good morning, everyone. If you can hear me, kindly put yes in the chat box. Wonderful. Well, my name is Tatiana Nin. I am the field director with Science is Us. And before we get started, we just wanted to share with you some housekeeping slides to ensure that our webinar goes as smoothly as possible. First and foremost, we thank you for your time this morning. We are presenting the last webinar of a series of webinars on the economics of climate change. This one is more focused on innovating for Maine's climate future. We'll learn more about these webinars as we go through, and just wanted to thank our sponsors, thank our primary partner, which is the Maine Chamber of Commerce Education Foundation, and just giving you some tips. So we will be recording this webinar, and we kindly ask you to mute yourself so that we can ensure that we hear our speakers loud and clear. If you do have a question or want to add anything to the conversation, you can raise your hand with this icon. And kindly note that we will be sending any materials that we refer to during the webinar via email. And so if you do have any questions, I ask you again to use the chat box. We'll have a wonderful group of thought leaders and panelists today. And with that, I have the honor, and then again, I'm repeating myself to kindly ask the questions using the chat box. I have the honor and pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of the Maine Chamber of Commerce, Patrick Woodcock, who is going to get us started with this conversation. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy this webinar.
Well, thank you so much, Tatiana. This is our third webinar that we have co-hosted with Science is Us, and it comes at a timely moment as the Conference of the Parties is convening for the 28th time in Dubai in 48 hours. When I think about climate change and the economy, I think it is fundamental in planning for all sectors. We're going to be primarily talking about the research and development side today, but the issue of climate change and the clean energy transition is well beyond simply thinking about solar panels going up on roofs, wind turbines going up across the country. It really goes to the fundamentals of supply chains across the globe, our consumer products, and thinking about the research and development that will position our state in a leadership role. I couldn't be more pleased to join with the speakers to discuss this. It highlights really how Maine has been punching above its weight on research and development, on climate change issues, both from our university, our efficiency program led by the Efficiency Maine Trust, and finally with the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. Maine has so much to gain from this, from looking at our forest products to substituting carbon-intensive products, reducing our household energy costs, which can be some of the highest in the country, and putting our manufacturing in a competitive position. I want to turn over to our partner for some brief introductions, and that's Rachel Korestes, who has been co-leading this series with us. Rachel.
Thanks very much, Patrick. And again, for folks, my name is Rachel Korestes. I'm the Executive Director of Science is Us. Science is Us is actually a national initiative. We are headquartered at AAAS, which is a multidisciplinary scientific society, but we have a steering committee that includes societies of a range of disciplines, from social science to electrical engineering. And our mission really as a nonprofit, non-lobbying organization is to try to tell the story of science and engineering. And we do that in a way that connects with folks at a human level. So we like to tell the story of what we call the people of science, but also the jobs that are available, the economic impact, and the potential for science and engineering really to have positive impacts on all of us in our everyday lives in Maine, but all around the country as well. So this webinar fits in nicely with that conversation, as now we're thinking about some of the innovation to come and the research and development that will support that. And of course, support for research and development is a key function of innovation, because there can't be innovation if there isn't any research behind it. Science is Us actually released a study, an analysis earlier this year that shows the impact of STEM already on Maine's economy. About 34% of Maine's workforce today is STEM professionals. That's a really large percentage of the state's workforce, and that's up from 32% just 5 years ago. So the STEM workforce in Maine is growing, and that workforce supports 26% of the state's economy, and that's also a really large portion of the economy driven by STEM. One of the interesting things in that data and that analysis is that over 56%, almost 57% of that STEM workforce doesn't hold a bachelor's degree. And I think we'll get into talking a little bit about this today. I mentioned the R&D and the innovation, but that future of the workforce, what's it going to take to actually be a leader in some of these spaces and to capitalize on some of the opportunities looking ahead, particularly around climate-related issues. There's huge opportunities, but there's opportunities for folks at every level of educational attainment. And so really looking forward to the conversation today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our first two speakers. That is Mina Nayak and Sarah Van der Zanden, sorry. And they join us from the JFF Labs, where Mina is a director in lifelong learning and Sarah is a senior manager. Mina leads the JFF's Research Insights team on the CREST initiative and is focused on providing foundational research and tools to promote the green economic transformation. Sarah leads the Quality Green Jobs Regional Challenge for JFF. That's an initiative sponsored by the Heirs Charitable Foundation. And that provides technical assistance to regions across the United States as they build and implement place-based green jobs strategies. So with that, I will turn it over to Mina and Sarah.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thanks everyone for having us and for joining us for this conversation. We are very excited to share with you a little bit about what we've been doing. And so as you've heard, my name is Mina. I am the director of lifelong learning in JFF Labs, but my area of focus is around skills, and that's actually what brought me to this work. Our whole idea, especially as we're thinking about this transformation towards a more sustainable and green economy, is that skills are the language that we need to be looking at, and that's how you affect change for STEM careers and making sure they're able to make an impact on a more climate-friendly, resilient economy. And with that as our framing mechanism, what we're really thinking about is that overall, nationally, there is this massive effort and move. We may not hear it called green jobs. We may hear it called clean energy jobs. We may not even hear them classified and qualified. And the reason for that is that what we're seeing is that this effort to support a more green economy, as we've named it at JFF, we're calling it a green economy, is broader than what most people will talk about when they hear the green sector. So when you think about the green sector, this is what you might consider the more traditional, it's funny to call it traditional because it's an emerging economy, but the more traditional roles that support a more sustainable tomorrow. This might range from more blue collar work like solar panel installers, all the way up to hydraulic equipment managers. And some of our more less accessible jobs, the more specialized jobs, chief sustainability officer. And what we're seeing with that, though, is that they're often tagged as green because they're seen as being the only ones responsible for supporting a clean economy. our argument and what we're seeing across national investments, if you think about the Justice 40 initiative that came out of the Biden-Harris administration, or the American Climate Corps that got announced just a couple of months ago, that this is actually an expanding definition. And so if you have a chance, we have a big piece of work that's been done. It's a digital magazine. It actually hosts and holds all of our work at JFF for CREST, for this climate effort that we're doing in climate innovation work. And what is in there is one of our core research papers, which is, what the heck is a green job? How is it growing, and what is the national move for it? What we found as we were doing our research is that green jobs need to be defined by the skills rather than the industry. And if there is a skill that is contributing to a more sustainable tomorrow, we should be tagging that a green job. And when you expand that definition, what you actually find is that all jobs contribute. All jobs have the potential to be green, particularly because what we expect is that there are going to be certain skills that are very durable. Think about the way that when recycling became a norm, all of us had to learn how to recycle. You still see logos and pictures on trash cans because people are reminding us how to recycle. But it starts in preschool. It starts at home before kids even go to school. But when it first came out, it was only in specific areas. And what we expect to happen is that there will be a certain type of skill set that support a green economy that will be that durable, that will continue to evolve and be that accessible. And so this would be for all jobs. And then as you work up into a certain technical expectation and specialization, you land in the STEM roles and these industries that we're talking about here today. And so the big thing is how do you actually start to prepare for this transformation, is to start thinking about both of those skill sets. The challenge is that with the more specialized skills, what we've found time and again, and you'll see this in our digital magazine too, it's a market scan that we released just last month, actually, maybe early this month, about training providers who support the development of green skills. One of the things they found is this is nascent. When we're talking about those specialized skills, this is nascent. People are, providers, education training providers are selecting very key skills like solar photovoltaic installers, building training programs around them, and then putting them out in the field so that folks can pick it up and put it in their jobs. Because it's nascent, it's hard to understand how you upskill a workforce. And so we recognize that. And so in Maine, as you all are thinking about this, what we actually recommend is to look at the spectrum. What do we think those durable green skills will be? Think power management, volt management, things like that, all the way up to those more technical skills, and then build public-private partnerships, work across your education systems, and start seeding these other more durable skills early on. And if you look in the digital magazine and look at our paper, you'll actually see a list and sample of skills that we've identified. The other thing that we provide in our paper, which I'll name here, is a way to imagine this transformation. So how do you know which skills are going to become more durable and which ones are going to become more specialized? And how do you actually build that in as your own economy is moving forward and you're keeping a specialized focus on these STEM jobs that are accessible, that are quality jobs, that are a major impact in your regional economy? Well, there is this green transformation cycle. And what we've identified is that there are certain skills that are being seeded. We don't know if they're going to stick. We don't know if they're going to last. There are ones that are being scaled. Those are showing promise. There are ones that are established. Those are happily going to be there. We know that they will be there. That is a very sound investment to make because we're seeing it picked up across industries. And then there are those that are at risk. These are the jobs that we think will not be climate resilient because of the actual negative impact they have on the climate and the economy. And so when you look across that spectrum, you start to identify that, believe it or not, a computer network support specialist accessible with an associate's degree, you don't need a four-year degree to access it, is in fact classified as a scaling green job. The skills that are in there include things like high voltage and power electronic management, electric utility, and those all contribute. So when you start doing that and layering it in, you're able to identify those durable skills. You build partnerships to provide that education and reskilling and training. And you start building in those durable skills earlier in a student's curricula so that they have it before they hit their professional careers. You'll be able to create an entire workforce that's ready to take on this spectrum of work. With that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Sarah, who will be able to talk a lot more specifically about regional impact.
Thanks, Mina, for that national context and overview. I'm Sarah, and I work with 20 regions across the United States, from rural Utah to Pittsburgh to New Orleans, and everywhere in between, as they're preparing their economies and their workforce for the STEM jobs of the future. And over the last 6 months of working with these regions, we've observed that the regions that are having the most success are generally doing 3 core activities. 1, we know there is a national labor shortage. So the regions having the most success in preparing their workforce for STEM and green jobs are looking in places that many folks don't often look for workers. They're looking for folks that face systemic barriers to quality jobs. So, for example, the Greater New Orleans Foundation recently discovered that half of their incarcerated population, folks serving long-term sentences, are serving those sentences in local facilities rather than DOC facilities, Department of Corrections facilities. So that's 14,000 people who are incarcerated long-term who are not receiving any workforce development training, no education. So they're taking their resources and investing in green workforce training in local jails to ensure that people leave jail with green skills, highly in demand skills, and that they're ready to be employed upon reentry. Number 2, this is a really important one and one that surprised us. Use language when you're recruiting the workforce for STEM jobs and green jobs. Use language that matters to your communities. We have found that about 70% of regions actively avoid terms like green, climate, sustainability because they can be divisive. And instead, they're using terms like economic opportunity, wealth building, family sustaining wages, which resonate across the board. So be conscious of that when recruiting new workers into this growing workforce. And then finally, regions that are having the most success are really embracing technology as a way to reach more workers while also keeping costs low. So for example, Binghamton University just received a massive federal grant, over $100 million, to bolster domestic battery production in New York State. And they know that in order to meet the demands, they're going to need to access the 28% of their workforce that does not have a high school diploma. And most of the people in that group are currently in low-wage jobs, and they can't afford to take time off to upskill, to do a 6-week-long training program, as low barrier as that might sound. So they're developing an XR training program that is accessible and flexible and can fit into people's lives and schedules. And I think with that, I will pass it over to our hosts, and please reach out with any questions about regional impact.
Thank you, Sarah and Mina. Next up, I'm pleased to introduce Jake Ward. Jake is Vice President for Innovation and Economic Development at the University of Maine. His office supports economic development by acting as a liaison for business and industry, facilitating technology transfer, and handling patenting, licensing, and commercialization activities for the university. And Jake also serves on the boards of several state and industry organizations. Jake?
Thank you, and thank you for having me today. It's good to see so many familiar names on the screen today. I'm glad you're hiding behind your names. It makes it easier for me. As it was described, I work at the University of Maine. The University of Maine is Maine's public land grant, sea grant, space grant university. With over 150 years of supporting Maine's economy, you wouldn't be surprised how much we're involved in the intersection of innovation and the climate, primarily around our natural resources and technology spaces. As we've just noted on many occasions, our environment, the changes to our environment are visible, and in some cases, obviously changing much faster than the other. The rising seawater temperatures in the Gulf of Maine and some of our extreme events are things we see every day. And yet at the same time, they present not only challenges to our kids, companies, and communities, but also opportunities for growth of the economy. But that means aligning what Maine's resources are. And by that, I mean talent. I think you did a great job talking about our workforce, but we have so many talented and creative people throughout the state. Innovation being the new ideas, the existing infrastructure, new infrastructure needed, and of course, investment to capitalize on these opportunities. Having sources of investment, whether it's public or private, is going to be a major component to this. Worldwide companies and their customers are responding to the calling for changes around climate, to decarbonize, to be greener. We see that accelerating in many places in Europe, for example, that are driving customers to want carbon-free solutions. And so being at the forefront of that on the United States is going to be an important part to capitalize on those opportunities. One of the things that just a couple of things I want to hit quickly on is for the state of Maine, particularly our forest-based economy, our forest-based resources being naturally sustainable, provide the renewable, sustainable building blocks for so many different opportunities to replace everything from single-use plastics to building materials that have large shelf life and carbon sequestration. And I just want to point out that the recent designation as Maine by EDA as a Forest Bioproducts Advanced Manufacturing Tech Hub is really built around that concept. And over the next few years, hopefully will accelerate the use of Maine's forest biomaterials in replacing many fossil fuel and petroleum-based products. But one of our biggest opportunities, I think, and one of the biggest things where UMaine has been a leader in for 10 years or so has been the area of offshore wind. Many people know that the resource in the Gulf of Maine, 156 gigawatts of power availability, the relatively small amount, 3 gigawatts, can help support Maine's energy transition away from fossil fuels, the electrification of heating and transportation. Maine has established the floating offshore wind roadmap. Would recommend anybody who is interested in that paying attention to it, which establishes not only just the energy goals, but also has the whole supply chain workforce development and strategy to build out the necessary industry to support extracting floating offshore wind. And of course, offshore wind is now a national wind shot, earth shot from the Biden administration. But there are offshore wind projects up and down the East Coast, West Coast, and throughout the world. In particular, looking at what Maine has the opportunity is floating offshore wind, and that gives us a chance to generate our own energy locally and be less dependent on importing energy sources. Creates the environmental benefit from fossil fuel elimination, incredible education and training and workforce development challenges, but the overall economic development opportunity is really in the ability to do all of the services needed to support that sector, from the professional services, including design and engineering, all that activity, permitting, environmental assessments, community and stakeholder engagement, the manufacturing components, the assembly of hulls, the construction of hulls, electrical interconnect, operation and maintenance, marine operations, ongoing monitoring, continuous R&D and innovation. There are just so many financial opportunities, economic opportunities, whether you're the largest company or the smallest company. If you've built a power plant or worked on a power plant, if you built a bridge or worked on a bridge, if you have marine operations, there's opportunities for you there. The opportunities for these, again, are really detailed in the offshore wind roadmap. UMaine particularly developed a technology, a floating technology that was designed specifically for Maine's environment, to be manufactured in Maine with existing companies, that can be exported up and down the East Coast if necessary, but really provides a true economic opportunity that helps meet the climate action plan and the economic development strategic plan. Beyond hulls, there's many innovation opportunities in everything from resource assessment, data collection, monitoring technologies, and remote sensing, mooring systems, alternative energy offtake approaches. There's quite a bit of R&D going in and looking at how to use the energy on site and convert it to other things versus electrical cables. But large-scale renewable energy development is a large-scale challenge as well, and it's going to take a lot of people to pull that together. And it just close with that the workforce is a huge issue, whether it's a STEM or degreed. We've got programs going forward right now between UMaine, Maine Maritime Academy, the community colleges, as well as we've got a really great program in the middle school, high school called the Windstorm Challenge, which is introducing kids to the STEM areas that are necessarily to look at floating offshore wind, where the students from different schools have design teams. They come to the university at the end of the year and have a competition. They float their hulls in our wave tank and wind tank. They do pitches on business and science, and they really get excited about the new opportunities. And I think that's really the bright spot of everything we do, is to see those young minds just trying to solve problems. So with that, I'll pass it on to Michael Stoddard.
So thank you very much, Jake. I think that is a good transition to Michael and to talk about the work of Efficiency Maine. So Michael Stoddard is the Executive Director of the Efficiency Maine Trust, the independent administrator for programs that promote energy efficiency, alternative energy resources, and carbon savings in Maine. Michael also serves on the Maine Climate Council, and he's the co-chair of its working group on buildings, infrastructure, and housing. And with that, we'll hand it over to Michael.
Thanks, Rachel, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us. As you mentioned, Efficiency Maine Trust is a quasi-state agency, and we handle the energy efficiency programs across the state on behalf of the electric and gas utilities in our state. And then we also have been assigned additional program activities with funds that we get from a variety of other sources, including federal grants and something called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is the carbon cap and trade system that we have in the Northeast. And really, it's a nice juxtaposition between what we do and what Jake was just talking about. Jake is talking a lot about the supply side of how we make energy and how we do that in a way that is trying to be sensitive to long-range climate goals. At Efficiency Maine, we're more focused on the demand side of the energy equation. So how do consumers use energy in their homes and businesses and institutions? And because we are a cold climate state and we have long winters, and because we have traditionally heated our homes and businesses with oil, we emit a significant amount of our state's greenhouse gas emissions by heating our homes and businesses. Close to 30% is just coming from heating space and water in our homes and businesses. So it's a very important greenhouse gas reduction opportunity. It also happens to be a tremendous economic opportunity because it turns out that the prices of home heating oil jump around due to things that are happening in the global marketplace. And as we've seen, that can go way up and way down, and people end up spending a lot for basic heating. So what we're trying to do is stimulate market transformation for new technologies that can help do that job more cost effectively and with lower carbon emissions. We do that primarily by providing education information, consumer information. We have a robust website where there's tons of information to help consumers understand their choices and to compare how much they cost and how they function. And very importantly, to connect consumers with contractors and the trade allies, whether they're electricians or plumbers or HVAC techs, so that they can get the work done on their homes or businesses. So our website and all of our collateral materials are really designed at pushing people to make those connections and think about those projects. What we have going for us to really give it an extra boost is financial incentives. We have very significant budgets supported by policies in our state legislature and from our Public Utilities Commission that give us the funding to provide financial incentives to emphasize and support the purchase of these new innovative technologies. And then we have some other things we do along the side to help make that work well. We have some quality assurance elements, and we provide support in the policy arena to continue these programs. Over the past 20 years or so, these programs focused a lot on new innovations in lighting. So first there was the fluorescent light bulb and the compact fluorescent light bulb. And then for the last 10 years or so, there's been a lot of attention on LED lights, which you now see are ubiquitous. They also have 90% less energy consumption, which means 90% less carbon emissions and 90% lower energy bills if you're on your electricity. So those have been a tremendous example of success of bringing innovation into the marketplace to help consumers and lower carbon. Now, looking forward, the new technological innovation relates to the refrigeration cycle. That would probably make you think about refrigerators, but in Maine, what's most relevant about that technology is heating, because you can run the process in either direction, either to make cooling or to make heating. Our biggest need is for heating, and so the advent of a highly effective, at very cold temperatures and very cost-effective air source heat pumps has been a huge breakthrough for us. So there are over 500,000 fully occupied, year-round occupied homes in our state. Our goal by 2030, according to our climate action plan in the state, is to have 115,000, roughly 20% of all those homes, fully heated with nothing but heat pumps. And so we have started 10 years ago with baby steps to introduce the Maine marketplace to heat pumps. We started with a pilot project. We tested that. We confirmed that they worked well in the cold weather. Then we started expanding that program so that it has become universally available and very well funded with generous rebates. We've now installed more than 150,000 individual heat pumps in the state, but in most cases, those have just been a partial heating solution in the home. They're just being used to supplement the central heating system. The new move for us is to switch that so that our focus is on heating the entire home. So we're shifting all of our attention in our heat pump programs to whole home and whole business heating solutions using heat pumps. This is going to be a heavy lift, but I think that we're on the right track, and I'm actually very optimistic we're going to get there. We see that when we are able to convert a home to a whole home heat pump system, an average Maine home, our calculations are that they will save $1,000 a year. So you can imagine what the impacts of that are expanded across all the homes that we touch and that we will touch over the next decade. Similarly, small businesses, multifamily buildings, school buildings. We have school buildings across the state now that are switching to heat pump only technology. So you can imagine the benefit economically for those school districts that are getting off of old, antiquated boiler systems using heating oil primarily, and so they'll be seeing significant reductions in their heating costs. They will get the additional benefit of cooling during the warmer months of the school year. And then that is also had a tremendous effect on our small businesses in the state. So we have more than 700 registered vendors of heat pumps in the state that are on our online searchable tool for people who want to find a contractor in their community. Search by your zip code and the radius that you're willing to search. So we're seeing now tremendous growth in these small businesses that provide this service of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So the jobs story has been terrific there. Somebody earlier mentioned what level of education. It runs the gamut, but there are a lot of kids coming straight out of high school and going into these jobs now, and they're making good money. So the same story pertains to domestic water heating. So heat pump water heaters also do a terrific job at less than half of the amount of energy consumed. So Maine is on a pace to do the most per capita heat pump water heaters of any state in the country. So we're really pleased to see that. The same story is about to start playing out with electric vehicles. So when you're wondering where the opportunities are for this innovation and the kinds of programs we run to see growth opportunities, we think it's in this whole category of beneficial electrification, whether it's on the heating side or with transportation. There's going to be this exponential growth in these sectors as people want to switch to a lower cost way to heat their businesses and homes or to operate their vehicles. And it has the very nice side benefit of being great for the environment. So the jobs we see are going to grow up in that area, I think, in being able to provide these installation services, ongoing maintenance services. How do you maintain an electric vehicle? How do you maintain the charger that charges the vehicle? How do you manage the charging so that when people are charging their vehicles, they're not doing it during the peak hours of the day, but they're doing it in the off-peak hours of the day when the grid can handle it better. That will also be a really important part of innovation and the opportunities we see in the years ahead, that we start to use our grid in a much more intelligent and efficient way. So those are some of the areas from our perspective, looking at the demand side of energy in Maine that we're really excited about. And I'll pass it back to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Michael. And our final speaker today is Dr. Kanai Tokunaga. She is a senior scientist at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, where she leads the Coastal and Marine Economics Lab. In her research, she uses various research methods, including bioeconomic modeling, econometrics, surveys, and interviews to approach coastal and marine resource management issues. And I'll turn it over to Kanai.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm very excited to have this opportunity. So again, my name is Kanai Tokunaga, and I'm trained as an economist, and my research really focuses on the oceans and how we humans interact with marine and coastal natural resources. So because my work is primarily about the oceans and how we operate in the oceans, I'd like to start by introducing a term, blue economy. So earlier we heard about green economy, but blue economy is becoming more and more commonly used. It's almost becoming like a buzzword. But what I think is really important is that blue economy as a term and as a concept is not just about investing in new blue tech industries. It is the concept that promotes not just sustainable use of marine natural resources, but it also is a term that promotes the equitable access and equitable. So it's a term that really promotes equity, and it is really about providing fair and equitable access to marine resources. It is about sharing of benefits from the marine natural environment in a way that is equitable and fair. So we are now living in the era of blue acceleration. It is a new phase in humanity's relationship with the ocean, really. We're experiencing a phenomenal rate of change over the last 30 years with a sharp acceleration of ocean uses. Globally, since the year 2000, marine aquaculture production has increased by 160%. Shipping cargo capacity has increased by 254%. Offshore wind energy generation capacity has increased by, which is crazy, 51,387%. And Maine is not really an exception from this trend. Aquaculture market report that my colleagues at GMRI put together indicated that the aquaculture market opportunity has been growing and will continue to grow, with projected growth exceeding $30 million by 2030. And that's just in Maine. Shipping cargo capacity in Maine also has been increasing. Over the past decade, it has grown 5 times. And just last year, in 2022, vessel cargo capacity has reached over 40,000 TEUs, which is the unit often used to measure cargo capacity. And we are also right in the middle of offshore wind energy development process. So innovations really are happening. Blue acceleration is happening as we experience climate change. And it's also happening in our traditional sectors, including commercial fisheries. So, for example, in our groundfish fishery in the Northeast US, electronic monitoring has been introduced and adopted as a way to monitor fishing activities. So, what is electronic monitoring? It's often called EM, which is short for electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring and EM is basically consists of a suite of video cameras and sensors on the vessel, and it replaces human observers to monitor fishing activities. Electronic monitoring, as opposed to human observers, is cheaper and safer. And recent development in AI and machine learning technology is really helping with this technology to further improve and then reduce costs by supporting AI supporting video imagery analysis. In seafood supply chain too, new technologies are helping with product tracing and quality control. So, for example, I've been involved with a project to examine and improve product quality of seafood harvested in our region. And we've been using this handheld sensor to get various measurement of fish. So you basically is a sensor and you put it over the unprocessed raw fish, and it gives us a measurement that can be used to evaluate product quality. So all these innovations are happening in the supporting sectors, but also traditional sectors, so commercial fisheries, aquaculture sectors are really interfacing with these new tools and technologies. Again, all these advances and blue accelerations are happening as we start to experience climate change. I was involved with a study that examined attributes of climate resilience in fisheries. And in the study, we noted that the level and capacity of individuals and communities to develop and acquire new technologies is one of the important attributes of climate resilience. Fishermen nowadays the fishery is a STEM career. They need to navigate complex management system and changing environments. In order for them to really be a good fisherman, they need to understand how science works, how stock assessment works. It really requires STEM knowledge and application. They need to interpret complex scientific information as climate change impacts the fishery stocks. The science is becoming more and more difficult to perhaps just understand on face value, and it really requiring fishermen to really get advanced knowledge of climate science as well as fishery science to really understand and what can happen to their resources. Aquaculture sector is the same as well. You need to monitor environmental conditions, growing conditions, and understand what they mean so that for their production and for their businesses to be successful. And they need to interpret those information and to make complex decisions to manage risks. So earlier I mentioned the study that I was involved in that examined the attributes of climate resilience in fishery systems. And in the study, we also noted that new technology could alter flows and distribution of benefits. So what do I mean by that? So in other words, new technology and innovation can have equity impacts. So I really emphasize that we need to pay close attention to who is benefiting from innovations and who can benefit from innovations that are happening and what kind of support is needed. It would require financial resources, education in formal setting and informal setting. For those who are already working in these sectors, they need training opportunities. so that more people can access and benefit from innovations. And my colleagues, and in blue economy sector in Maine, offshore wind development is currently happening, and lots of the decisions are made at quite fast-paced and also in a dynamic way. And my colleagues at Gulf of Maine Research Institute provided what is called Offshore Wind Energy Resource Hub, which integrate information. It really helps stakeholders understand what kind of science goes into identifying offshore wind energy development areas, and then what they need to know and how they can engage with the process. I'd be happy to share the link later, but these are all the things needed for everyone to really benefit from blue acceleration. And what's really important, again, I'm highlighting that being able to use new technology, new innovation, really, it's not just in a formal educational setting. It needs to happen on the job. So on-the-job training is important, extremely important. And it also, what we call socio-cognitive influences on the behaviors, the social interaction with others, your own beliefs and value system, those things impact the individual's willingness and ability and acceptance of new technologies. And then that is an important skill in order for someone to be climate resilient. And so, again, I would like to highlight a blue economy is not just about blue tech and new industries. It promotes sustainable use of marine natural resources in a way that ensures and restores equity. And now hand it back to Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Kenai and to all of our speakers. As a reminder, if you have a question you'd like to ask our speakers, you can drop it into the chat box now. I'll start us off. This one is sort of a question that I think probably everyone on the panel could take a shot at if you're interested in it. But we've talked a lot today about new economies and changes to the workforce and equity issues as well. But it's a lot of new stuff, new areas of innovation, industries, and things to think about. One of the questions that I have is, how do we get that change to happen? So how do we influence folks to pursue careers in these fields? How do we influence folks to fund research or to pursue research and development in these fields? How do we begin to change that mindset so that we can actually create the innovation and the equity that is necessary in all of these spaces? So I think any one of our speakers could tackle a piece of that. So I'll open it for whomever wants to go first.
Pete Patrick has his hand up, but he's being shy apparently. So maybe I'll go first. And from our perspective, one thing that has been extremely effective is making it an attractive economic opportunity. Financial incentives do have an impact. We drive demand by getting consumers interested in a way that they can change the technology they have around their house or around their business or around their institution. That requires work to be done. Somebody needs to sell them that product, install that product, maintain that product, provide financing for that product, provide legal services in some cases. Architects and engineers play a role with the bigger projects. There's a whole bunch of jobs that are involved in supporting that demand growth. And if the policies and the budgets can consistently send that signal to the marketplace year after year, people will make business decisions around that. They'll say, you know, it looks like this program is not going away for the next 5 years. I think I should invest in a couple more trucks. I think I should hire a couple more staff and train them so that they can do this particular task, because this is not going away. This is going to be here for the next 5, 10, 20 years. So that's one piece of the equation, is make it worth people's time to make a career and to invest in their businesses to provide those services and those products.
Patrick, would you like to follow up on that?
Well, I was going to add to your question. I thought it was remarkable how Mina prefaced the conversation about sort of discussing, and Sarah discussing, how we should talk about this issue in a local context. And that is exactly what the speakers here today did. And instead of climate change, we were talking about uh, bioproducts and research and development and heat pump water heaters and lower the costs for energy bills, and talking about traditional marine resources growing in a blue economy. And I thought it was remarkable how Maine is doing that, and maybe that's a part of our success, that we're talking about a really local opportunities. I did want to kind of, in hearing that, I did want to ask the panelists. There's also a lot of interest in addressing and working on climate change from students, from, and maybe to Jake. You know, is there a way that we translate maybe interest in that topic generally to somebody thinking about an engineering career, talking about a traditional forest products industry, and making that connection that that's actually addressing climate change?
Yeah, I think that the theme is pretty predominant in a lot of our STEM disciplines. Certainly the natural resources side of the house, whether it's the ocean or forestry or ag. I mean, climate is what you deal with anyways every day, and so being aware of what climate is and how it impacts your business, your career, your livelihood is always there. And I think that now we have courses and curriculum that are specific to addressing how to watch, how to monitor, how to adapt, how to mitigate. So I would say that, you know, in the colleges, in the university, and I would say it's probably ubiquitous throughout the country, whether you call it climate change or not, it is definitely a topic. There's a tremendous amount of interest from our students. I'd say that we are trying to make sure that people are aware that the study of the environment is ubiquitous, and it does present both the economic opportunities and I always like to use the kids, companies, and communities. You know, everything that Michael was talking about. You know, when you start talking about putting heat pumps in public buildings and schools and creating EVs for buses and community transport, you're strengthening the community, you're creating awareness, and you're creating interest in how those young folks or whatever age want to pursue that. And so the other thing I would just add that I think is really interesting about Maine is, with the success that everybody's talked about, with a state the size we have and 1.3 million people, we can make a difference at a statewide level, and we can make it faster than many other states. So we have a chance to be a leader in some of that. I think we definitely are. And if you can imagine every public school becoming net zero or low efficiency, I think that's doable within the state of Maine. The transition to public vehicles, capitalizing on our renewable energy, conversions to fossil fuel free materials, that we can drive this at a statewide level.
There's a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to try to, in the interest of time, combine a few of these, but there's two that sort of focus on the role of lenders and investors in these spaces, and then one that tacks onto that and asks whether we see Maine opportunities when the SEC climate disclosure rule goes final. So would anyone like to jump in on kind of the role of business and investors and sort of that financial infrastructure?
Yeah, I can take a stab here because it's something that we're actively discussing a lot. And part of our CREST work includes supporting entrepreneurs and building up some of these programs and defining what pathways are. As it relates to lenders, it's being able to amplify the work that's happening. So if there is a particular area, say in the blue economy or something like that, that is just on the precipice of becoming, and if you recall the green transformation cycle I mentioned, right? It's moving from this seeded concept, this idea that we're testing something and it could be scaled. It could become, as Jake said, ubiquitous across an entire industry or even an entire economy. To get there, that's where we need that sort of financial investment and support. And so it's making those decisions. And if anyone is able to, I know Sarah dropped the link to the paper, we've actually defined by each stage, by the seed scaling and established stage, what actions folks should take, where an investment is reasonable, where we actually think this is a place for an early angel investor versus a more established business practice. And that's what we're talking about here. And it's identifying either the skills or the scaled job itself, that this job is transforming and we want to make that happen and catalyze that effort.
I'll
Great.
chime in. Sorry.
I just want to try to get the last question addressed quickly in the last minute that we have here. Any planning in Maine regarding EV battery recycling or secondary market reuse?
To me, the Efficiency Maine Trust currently runs programs to provide incentives on EV chargers and on electric vehicles themselves. I am not aware of any planning as yet that has been done specifically on that. I know it's happening at a national level. I know that there's innovation happening on potential reuses for those batteries, including for storage for grid support or large businesses. And I think that's going to be interesting, but we have not currently done anything on that. I will say on the investing, to Keith Bisson's question, I think there's tremendous opportunity for helping out the small businesses that are growing fast. And they usually started by a couple of folks who knew something about the trades, but they don't know a whole lot about business. They don't know a whole lot about growing a business. There's so many pieces that go into expanding that they could really use help with. Some of it is just financial, some of it is planning, but I know we're hearing from some of these small businesses saying, I'm going as fast as I can on this conveyor belt to deliver all these heat pump installations, and we got that down. But growing the business, I could really use some help. So I think that's a place. And then as Keith knows, on the demand side, the consumers need to invest a bunch of money in capital improvements. So a heating system like made of heat pumps for a home is going to cost between $5,000 and $25,000. Not everybody has that much money sitting around. Our incentives are very helpful on that, and the federal ones too, but they don't get the whole job done. Somebody is going to need help with the balance of the project cost. And over time, these programs should, over a course of a decade or more, they should start to recede into the background, and this should just be the thing that the marketplace does. So there's going to be a need for financing on that side of the equation too.
Oh, great. Thank you all for that great conversation. I feel like we could go on for much longer, but unfortunately our time for today is up. So I want to thank all of our speakers today for the conversation. It's been really interesting and informative. And most of all, thank our colleagues at this Maine State Chamber for this great program and for this series. We've dropped a few links in the chat for folks. We will send some of this material in a follow-up email when it's over. And as Tatiana mentioned, the recording will also be available on the Chamber's website after the program is over. So thank you all again for coming, and stay tuned. I think we will continue this conversation over the months ahead. So thank you again for your participation and your time today.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate the partnership here.